So it's been a while since our last video. We're very sorry about that, but we have been active over on the Discord server, so if you want to join, there'll be a link in the card and in the description. Let's link everything we've spoken about over the design period and put that together properly and talk about what will make yours and our horror games great. This is everything we've covered on the design side for right now. I'll be referring to them periodically throughout this one, so if you want to understand the concepts fully, I highly recommend going back and watching those ones if you haven't already. Now, on to the video. In the Instilling Fear episode, I spoke about the immersion and thrill of Subnautica. I think it's a prime example of what horror should be, a disturbing rendition of a player's worst emotions, aka the heebie-jeebies. I'll play this one out a little similar, talking about the main areas of development and how they should interact with each other. Now, this can be split into 3 sections: gore, fear, and shock. Now, bear in mind that all of them should always be used together to keep it interesting. Using too much of the same thing will always get boring, and this is called desensitization, and this is exactly what you want to avoid when creating your game. This is seen in many horror arcade games such as Call of Duty Zombies and more. Take this for example. Seeing a corpse with their guts hanging out is disturbing to say the least, but what's scarier? An alive person scrambling to put their organs back in their body as they slowly die. That was a bit crude, but I'm trying to get my point across. Using shock is often cheap. This is what I was talking about in the Instilling Fear video. Jump scares are often more annoying than using the other tactics, but if used properly, it will come across as smart rather than a heart attack simulator. For instance, using tension with music, particularly drones and stinger chords, flashing lights, chase scenes. Then calm. You've escaped. You feel safe. Clichés are important to avoid. Creating a copy of something like The Conjuring will never do you any favours, and too many horrors follow the same trend, and going against that at least on a small level will give you a much more enjoyable game. Games and media use this theorem to accurately represent the feelings they are trying to portray, though there are almost definitely more points to that. These are just the main ones. My point is, do not use only one method of horror. It will only come back as repetitive and boring.
Narrative is a story element of the game design. It guides the player of where they should go, informs them of the lore of the game by an interactive element, environmental storytelling, dialogue trees, and much more. However, what makes a successful narrative in a horror game? We need this to get the player into the flow of the game, otherwise they can lose their interest / get confused in the game. Number 1. Provide breadcrumb but keep it low key. Breadcrumbing is low key hints to inform the player what they should do / where they should go. Examples may be a trail of lit candles, an item that has just fallen, a sound in the distance, or pieces of shattered glass on the floor. Breadcrumbing is a great way to provide guidance to the player of where they should go or do, without being too obvious. With horror games, to provide a horror aspect, they are usually quite mysterious in terms of the atmosphere, the story, etc., as not knowing what is going on can add towards that fear for the player. Giving the player too much breadcrumbing information will make them feel more at ease, which isn't the main intention of horror games. That would be an example of bad breadcrumbing / narrative. Number 2. Give the player some breathing room. To keep the player enticed and engaged, breathing room is required to make sure they catch their breath and to be able to concentrate on the game. If there are constant fear elements with no break, the player won't be able to enjoy the game and may be entirely put off playing it. This can come under user experience for the player. Number 3. Provide immersion. To absorb the player into the game, it needs to be as immersive as possible. If the visuals of the game completely conflict with the genre of the game, such as pink unicorns in a dark horror game, then it will be massively difficult to get the player immersed into the game and its environment, meaning they are less likely to gain any fear from the game. To make effective immersion, yourself must pretend that you're in that world that the player will be experiencing. If you were in that world, what would you see? What would you hear? In terms of a horror game, you'd see tons of shadows, lack of light, blood scattered across the floor, hearing screams, and also objects being knocked over.
Mechanics are sort of the other side of the coin, though buggy and inefficient code can break the game's immersion just as much as the art side. You would need to find the balance between realism and surrealism. You'll always need an edge of surrealism to ensure the game is playable and fun, otherwise you end up with a very tricky to navigate game. Reusing mechanics becomes repetitive, unless done in a professional manner. If you use a chase mechanic multiple times in your game, space it out with the tension building. Add hiding mechanics so there's moments of pure panic and really flesh out the emotional manipulation. Using too much of the same thing can get boring, but hedging in smaller mechanics can create an atmosphere of fun to an otherwise boring game. We'll be going further into this when we start designing the mechanics for our game, so stay tuned for that. Sound, as I've mentioned before, is extremely overlooked in media, but if you look at all the best media products, you will hear some of the great application of sound in film and games. Foley is a term typically used for film, but it can expand to games too, using objects such as vegetables, sand, water and driftwood to make more realistic sounds for the final product. A link in the description will take you to one of the best videos I've seen based on this topic. Music can be used to build tension, create atmosphere and manipulate the player's emotion. Within horror, this can be used alongside droning sounds which are consistently heard throughout the game. This could be the electrical buzz of a telegraph pole or a background railway. Even crickets and cicadas work for this. If there's something always in the background of your audio, it'll add some depth and realism. Using these droning sounds can be paired with stinger chords. These are high-pitched scary sounds you hear in horror movies, such as this. Paired together, it makes an epic combo to enhance immersion into the storyline and gameplay. Stringed instruments, such as the violin, are often the creepiest of the plethora of instruments around. With cellos hitting the bass notes and the violin hitting those higher stinger chords, you can create a world of atmosphere without having any visuals. Piano is also incredibly important. Those stinger chords will be brilliant on the piano too, and having a mixture of everything is going to bring your game to life. For example, listen to this super early draft music Hotel Zero made, and close your eyes. Feel it. His link will be in the description if you want to check out more of his work. The last thing I want to speak about is silence. Silence in video games is very important, as it fits right in that uncanny valley, just creepy, especially if you expect there to be music. The best way to use this is to add it as a drop for the final point of tension, but this is what your players expect, so towards the end of the game, just as they're used to it being at the point of a jump scare or a scary sequence, you can place it where nothing significant happens. This will make the player expect something that just isn't there at all.